about 7 seconds, you are going to be live.
Okay.
Let's get started, man. Who are you?
I'm Todd Tiemann. I'm the owner of Die Hard Dice. Jesse, my wife, and I run it. And yeah, we've been working with Crafty for over a year now on this project, making metal dice.
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking before Pat stepped in and managed to bring it home. It was kind of interesting, all the different decisions that we had to go through with Charles, and it was great having Charles because he knew Mistborn, right? So he was able to kind of give us suggestions as to which platings and which what do you call the difference between, in your terms? So for instance, this is the cadmium and how it's a recessed, we're calling it pulling because it's a Mistborn thing. But what's the difference between cadmium, which is have a recessed number, and let's say electrum, which is flush?
Yeah.
What do you call that?
Recessed. Yeah, we use the term recessed faces. Yeah. For anything that has the pushing style and or sorry, the pulling. Any of the pushing. There's really no term. I guess we call it normal or classic.
Normal,
or
classic,
sunken numbers. Recessed. Well, what we do is we say sunken numbers or sunken face.
Cool.
Is pretty much.
And how long have you guys been making dice and stuff? I mean, I ran into you a couple of years ago, but I'm not really sure where you started.
Yeah, we opened shop almost exactly 4 years ago. But the first 2.5 years were just running it out of our house, out of our master bedroom, converted to fulfillment warehouse.
So you want to hear a funny story about bedrooms and fulfillment? So Crafty Games, one of our clients, obviously, they were using a retailer in California to do their fulfillment because they had 7-8 cases worth of stuff and they wanted to find a new home. I'm like, just send it to me. So I ended up putting it in my bedroom, and then we did the first dice Kickstarter, and Joey did that in my kitchen. It was just sitting in my garage. And we did a couple of other Kickstarters. And then when we got to 7C, we were like, yeah, we can't fit 14 pallets in my garage. So we had to find other locations. And then when we did Cthulhu Wars, obviously we had to get a warehouse, an actual warehouse. So Joey's right there. He's like, yeah, we finally had to get a real job. So yeah. Well, we got a number of questions people wanted to ask, and in the interest of getting to the point, I will ask you the first couple, and then as people ask questions in the chat, I may break the rhythm and jump in with some questions from the audience. But the first question we have is, how are the dice created? Like, what's the process?
So the very first step, the first step is just kind of ideation and kind of brainstorming and creating and coming up with the idea itself. And that's often done on paper. Just like drawing out, like in this case, it wasn't on paper because we had the actual designs for the shapes, for the symbols already, created. So in this case, we started right in CAD and just started taking the design, taking the symbols and kind of putting them on pre-existing dice shapes that we had. I could show you.
Sure.
Some of that process here. Can you see that?
Yes. Is that the
this is just
your version of your version of the vector files that we sent you?
Yeah. This was just pulling in the vectors and then dropping a name next to it so that we could see what we were doing, and then.
So I have a request. People probably don't want to see me over the top of the stuff. Do you have another screen you can push me over to?
I've only got the one.
That's fine. There we go. That's better. That way people can see more of what's going on. Yeah, hide me. Cool.
Um,
Oh, I see. So is this a different image, or did you just
this
zoom in on?
is this is so this the previous one was just the symbols. This
Okay.
is those symbols thrown onto dice shapes. So we've got on the right hand side, right side over here, we've got the recessed um, uh, numbers, in this case symbols, and on the left over here we've got the recessed faces. So pushing over here, pulling on the right, and
Pushing is going to be
or
on the right.
pushing.
Yeah, yeah. Pushing
Oh,
on the right.
yeah, pushing right.
Yep.
Yep. So then from there, I take those 3D CAD files that I've created, the 3D designs, the models, and we'll 3D print them. Just kind of see. There are things that you can learn when doing the 3D printing that you can't catch in the CAD stage.
I know that when you were talking with the guys at, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. In their review of the dice, the guys at,
yeah. So
who did you talk to about that? It was Benjamin Kocher, I believe, or Coker. When he had this image, I think, from you.
Yes, yeah, for the review, for
Yeah.
the kind of preview of these. Yeah, so in this case, in the Mistborn dice, what we found pretty quick was that some of just taking the exact shapes and translating that and putting them in a die wasn't quite enough, because the actual designs are have very sharp points. And if we just drop those right on there, like half of that really fine tip would just almost disappear. You couldn't see it anymore. So we did. Oh, I thought I had another image of it, but looks like I don't. So I had to go in and make modifications to them to kind of fatten the tips a little bit. Okay. And I think this is from a shot.
I'm comparing the Laurassium right now to the actual vector file. I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah. So they just wouldn't read, right? Especially when it came on the pushing ones.
Right.
They kind of lose the detail of those tips. So after some adjustments, we also, we'll do 3D renders after we're when we're trying to decide on colors and metal plating and stuff. In the case, for the Mistborn dice, we're using now we're using plating styles that we're really used to using, so we didn't have to experiment much.
Right.
So we didn't have to rely on the renders for very much, because we already had examples of real world plating styles that would match what we're looking for.
And I remember when I was talking with Charles about the different initial suggestions that he made, you sent us samples of dice you'd already made with those plating styles, and it definitely sped up the process. It's much easier for some people like me who learn by doing or learn by touching to actually have those dice there in my hands.
Yeah, so to your point, all of these were pictures I think that Charles had sent to you as we were looking at styles and colors and trying to nail down what we could use to represent each metal.
I'm noticing the little blue paint on some of them.
Yeah,
it's like I scraped that off.
Yeah. Charles literally was scraping that paint off, and we still had some blue left. Also, really early on, we were looking at 4 different shapes.
Right.
So
we chose the 2 on the right. What were the 2 on the left? I forget the names.
I think we had divided them up into pushing and pulling, and then also in internal, external. So that's what I think these were going to be. But we ended up honing in on just the 2.
Yeah, just for anybody who's listening, the reason we went away from there's 2 reasons. Primarily, we decided against the more square dice, especially the one in the lower left, was primarily because we wanted to have a uniform shape for all the dice. Because we assumed that people would want to have some uniformity even as the pushing and pulling was different. But mostly it's because these are metal dice, and a sharp edged point like that on a table would be a no at my house. So we opted for the more rounded corners so that people wouldn't be writing us saying, "You ruined my table."
Yeah. And we were grateful for that, actually. Like, if you look across all of our current offerings, we really try to be careful with where and how we use sharp edges, because they will a solid cube, 16 millimeter cube of metal that's sharp is going to ruin a table, and will ruin other dice. If you were to throw, 6 of those in your hand and just shake them vigorously, you're probably going to destroy the rest of the dice along with, all of them. So.
Yeah, I think people fail to realize how heavy these are. That was the one thing I noticed by physically getting it in my hand. I mean, your name, in the products that you guys do, I think people that have your products, they know that this stuff is hefty. They realize, and people have bought metal dice in the past. They haven't since, but they may have bought aluminum dice, and those are light as feathers. These are not light as feathers. These are hefty pieces of art, essentially. Let's see. We had somebody ask in the chat a question, and you brought it up before we started talking. So before I forget about it, so that people know, on the Kickstarter page, this is the dice tray. I do not have a copy of the dice tower. However, I know somebody that does.
Yeah. We've got one of those right here.
And is that the one that has the logo on the back?
This isn't. It's en route right now. It's being flown across the ocean. And that one has red on the inside.
Okay.
To match the tray. So this is the stock one, like our original
one
design
that we did. Yeah. So why don't you show people how it works, like how it pops together and stuff, and turn it over so they can see where the logo will be on the.
Yeah. So we're there. The version that we're having sent over right now has the Mistborn logo here, but we're going to move it up and see if we can make it as big as we can here in this center fold piece.
Great.
So this is it, flat, and you just pull forward, or just move the sides up, snap that front one, and make sure that your bottom flap is in position.
All right, so you have a tumbler flap at the bottom to kick it out into the dice tray.
I don't know if this is visible or not.
It is.
There are tumblers inside, and it really is just like a pop-up book from your childhood.
Oh, nice.
As it separates, those tumblers fold up.
Okay. So I see 3, right?
Yeah.
Or two on one side,
and 2 on the other, and then the bottom
five total.
Nice.
I didn't realize there was that many tumblers on the inside. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's that easy, and fits nice and snug inside the tray.
Have any dice you can roll in there so people can see?
I have dice? Yeah.
I'm guessing you have some Mistborn dice. There they are.
Right here.
Here's the pretties, the precious.
Yep.
Nice.
So, and then
I'm glad it worked.
And folds nice and flat.
Cool, and the tray folds pretty flat. What's the difference between the size of the unconstructed tower and the tray when the tray is flat? Are they similar in size for transportation purposes?
Identical. We were going for exact same shape, but it got a little tough on the tower to make it exactly the same size. In future iterations, maybe we can pull it off, but it is very close. So you've got maybe half an inch to 3/4 of an inch taller of the tower.
And both pieces are going to have the logo. My tray has the logo, and you've said that the tower will have the logo as well.
Yep.
And both will have the same red felt on the inside. So I think the only difference will be the leather, correct? The tray has a little bit of a rougher, cowhidey, more like leather, and that has more of a premium book leather.
Right. Yeah,
the tower has more of a kind of like
the tower is a little smoother.
Right.
But,
they definitely look good together. So
Thanks.
Cool.
They will look great in red, I think.
Oh, I think red was the best. Well, I mean, personally, I think burgundy is the best color. So I'm a little bit jaundiced when people suggest otherwise. But I'm glad I prevailed, and we got the red. But come on, it's Mistborn. I mean, it's got to have fire somewhere, right? We got the fire, and we've got the ash. So we've got them both.
There you go.
So. Right. Oh, yes. And this is all PU leather. Like, it's not real leather, correct?
That's correct. It's 100% synthetic.
All right. So we talked about the creation process. We talked about the tower and the tray. I wanted to make sure we did that.
I guess we didn't really finish up the creation process.
Yeah, go ahead.
We didn't talk about anything like the actual manufacturing of the dice. So we've got the 3D prints. We go back and forth for a while. We nail down all the tiny little curves and all the sharp bits. And once we're all happy, that's when we have the molds created. So these are steel molds. So CNC or there's another manufacturing EMD. Electromagnetic deficit. It's in there somewhere. There's a D and there's an E. Anyway, the steel mold.
3 letters.
3 letters.
Yeah. 3 letters. The 3-letter mold. NSA. So, FBI.
Yeah. So either it's cut from steel or it's.
Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna mute my mic. My guys are shipping a bunch of crafty stuff all over the world, and they left the door open, so I'm hearing a bunch of
tape,
pallet jack. Yeah, no, it's forklifts and stuff. Because the warehouse is literally 20 minutes. Yeah, they're really loud.
20 steps.
20 feet that way. So again, so your FBI molds.
Yeah, we make FBI molds out of steel.
The government's listening. This is actually a joke.
So they're cut out of steel, either milled or essentially vaporized. But we make the steel molds, and the dice themselves are die cast in zinc. So using hot chamber injection molding. So that means that there's a big vat of molten zinc, and then it's pushed at high pressure into the molds, and it fills the cavity. And
so very similar to how you would make an acrylic die.
Yeah, very similar,
but with hot metal.
With hot metal, yeah. So they're die cast in solid zinc, and then polished by hand, because there will be some flash or some just artifacts from the casting process. Mm-hmm. So they're not tumbled, but they are hand polished gently. At which point they're kind of cleaned up and then plated, and then in most of our other dice, they then have a last step of putting like an inlay or painting in the number. But all of these are left kind of pristine in their post polishing state, plated state.
So let me see if I can regurgitate to you what you tell me. So I'm holding the bronze die, which somebody will be learning that they won this exact die today. We haven't announced who yet, but we'll be announcing it soon. So I'm holding it in my hand. This comes out of the mold, and it's polished by hand. Mm-hmm. And then you plate it to look like this. This is one of my favorite die, by the way. This bronze one is one of my favorite. So how does that work? I mean, how do you get this awesome plating to stick to the die?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not paint. It's it, like some sort of electromagnetic wizardry that you guys do?
Absolutely. It is electromagnetic. It's just electroplating. So
okay.
So and we can come back to this step a little later if you want to talk about let me just go into it. So there's multiple ways to plate. The most common across most of these dice are to plate them in kind of rack them. So there's little prongs, because you have to hold the dice somehow, and it's got to have some sort of metal connection to the metal for electroplating to happen. Mm-hmm. So little metal prongs that just connect into each side of the recessed face, or two sides inside the numbers usually. And then they're dropped down and into a vat of different chemical baths, and then electroplating. You could look it up. There's chunks of metal and there's electricity and little particles of metal transferred to metal. So first, all of them are plated in copper because copper is so conductive. All right. And so all of these have a very thin copper base if you were to like try to scratch away at them. Or at some point, maybe years down the road, you might see like a lightening of some of the colors that shift maybe toward kind of a reddish, a real pink copper, because there is copper under the final color. And then
so zinc, then copper, then whatever else is on top.
And then sometimes it's multiple colors on top of that, like to build up to the final color.
And then, I mean, do they come out of that process? Like, for instance, I'm holding the Nicrosil, which is one of my other favorites because it's really shiny. It's the, I don't know what you called it. I think it was gunmetal.
We call it Sinister Chrome.
Sinister Chrome, right? Does it come out chromy like that? Or does it come out more like some of the more weathered looks, and then you polish it again to make it shiny? How does that?
Any of the shiny ones are, and even the satin ones are going to come out exactly like you see them right there.
And satin would be like Electrum, this one here. So
yes, yeah. Okay. So they'll come out looking exactly like that. The ones so I mentioned a second ago, there's different ways to plate, and one of the other ways is using barrels, and so they're kind of. They're not held with prongs, but they're kind of tumbled, not with a polishing medium, but they're tumbled, and those are the more rough looking colors,
like bronze, like my favorite. Yeah. Okay,
let's see.
But I think the one that really was exciting for us, and this the one I really it wanted to ask you about, is the harmonium. It looks like you took a chrome dye and then blowtorched it.
Yeah. So they are. So these are made using a process so the melting point of zinc is actually like, I think within 100 or so degrees Celsius of the point at which using a blowtorch on, say, titanium or steel would cause this anodization. So using a torch is actually dangerous with these, because if you're not just right, you can actually melt your dye trying to get it to happen. So there's a totally different process that that's done in a vacuum.
Fairy tears? Is this like fairy tears dripped on here, and that's why it's all rainbowy?
Yeah, we make fairies cry.
That's good. I'm sorry to get all your secrets out. Yeah, I'm sorry to get all your secrets out, but I was wondering if it was fairies or.
Well, it really depends on the fey creature. You gotta you gotta match the desired look to the tears of the fey creature. So.
Understood. What would
I don't feel like you're giving out our secrets.
Would a unicorn dye be a different company because it would be all bone?
Oh, yeah. There are unicorn dice out there, but
yeah, there are. All right. So another question people are going to have is about the balancing, and I because of the way you create the dice, it sounds like they're inherently balanced. But why don't you speak to balancing? And the other follow up to that is because the pushing and the pulling difference between the dice. Does the embossing of one side and the emboldening, the push versus pull, does that change the balancing, or are they balanced even if? Yeah, how did you ensure that?
Great question. So the answer is yes. But long answer is what I shoot for when I'm doing the CAD work, and the software makes this relatively easy, is to make sure that each face is volumetrically equal. So what I'll do first is just put all the pieces in place and check the balance, check for the center of gravity, and kind of see where I'm at. And I shoot for, I don't know, a couple decimal places off of 0, 0, 0. is usually just fine. But if there's some sort of problem, then that's when I start making sure, okay, all the faces have to be volumetrically equal, and or this one face seems to be pulling in positive X. I need to, go and tweak that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, before the dice design is considered finished, I need to be sure that it is balanced. It is as close to 000 as I can get, maybe 4 decimal places from it. That's pretty good.
It's pretty accurate. Well, you can do that with CAD, so that means that you're not creating a die, testing it, going, well, that didn't work, let's shave a little off. You're actually doing it programmatically, which is nice.
And then the steel molds are made off of my design. So
cool.
So when the die pops out of the mold, it's almost perfect. I'm not going to say they're perfect because like I mentioned, there is an element of human interaction there because they are hand polished lightly to remove any marks or artifacts from the molding process. Or the casting process. So I'm not going to claim these are precision or perfect, but I also think that is basically an impossibility with dice.
Right. Okay.
But we also do random, we will, every time I do a new design, I like to do some tests against them, do a chi-squared goodness fit probability test, just to kind of, sanity check, make sure the math checks out.
I think people would be interested in knowing something we haven't shared with them, which is that you guys hand inspect all these sets before they come to us. So when these come off the line before Crafty Games gets them, effectively before they enter my warehouse 20 feet that way, you guys are going to hand open all of these things to make sure they're right, and then you're going to ship them to us. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you talked about care, right? I mean, that's a lot of care to make sure that the dice are done right. And I think people would like to know that. I mean, do you do that with all your products? You hand inspect everything?
Yeah. All the dice get checked, and then we spot check. The trays rarely have problems. Towers haven't had problems. So, and scrolls, so some of our accessories are not problematic. So we kind of spot check them as we're picking them for fulfillment.
Sure.
All the dice get checked once, and then we check them a second time when we go to fulfill. A little quicker the second time, but yeah, we check everything we can. We have a reputation to uphold, so.
I mean, it is in the name of your company, Die Hard Dice. It would be.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And speaking of care, I mean, people have asked a couple questions about the durability. So here's one: how do or should the dice hold up when used? Will they get damaged if used? What wear can be expected?
So that can vary a little bit. Overall, so electroplated dice are really durable, and you shouldn't really have problems. But that said, after years of doing customer service for people buying our dice, we found that there are some things that you can do to help ensure that your dice going to stay as nice as possible. So if you one thing is your rolling habits. Actually, it's almost 2 pieces: your rolling habits and your storage. So for rolling, best case scenario is not to just take a whole handful and shake them together real hard for 30 seconds. They'll be fine, but they will dent each other. The electroplating is not going to chip off, so if it gets dented, it's not going to chip. It will have a little tiny dent. And even though we used rounded edges, you can still cause tiny little micro dents all over your dice. So I mean, it's not a huge problem, but if you want them to look as clean and nice as possible forever, then only use a couple at a time, or you could use all of them if you want. Just don't go to town shaking them in your hand or a dice
cup. Try
to
damage them.
Yeah, don't. Yeah. Treat them with a little bit of respect. But no dice cups. Also, I mean, those are usually people really start to shake those things up.
Sure.
So
and they get this
rolling,
centrifugal force going, and it really, bashes them against each other.
yeah, exactly.
No rolling on the, if you're gonna play dice, don't roll on a asphalt, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. These will hold up really well because of the rounded design.
Sure.
Better than say even a full set of dice would, because usually there are some sharp edges on some of
Like a
a
D4.
full poly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would expect them to not really show wear if you're not being too exuberant with your rolling, and if
Sure.
you're rolling into something that is either padded or, well, yeah, like I mean the tray that you guys are offering is the perfect rolling solution.
Right. Just drop them into the tower, have them kick out the bottom, and you're good to go.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
normal use like that, I would not expect to see much wear at all. And some of these are going to hold up really well. Any of those ones that kind of have that ancient look on them, you may really never notice because they're already kind of slightly pitted and kind of worn.
That's why bronze is the
So,
best. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I love that die.
So that one may never show any kind of wear.
Yeah.
But
What
also
about
over,
storage? You mentioned storage. How?
yeah,
Obviously, we have the tins that everybody's going to
that's the
get.
answer.
So
That right there is the answer. Don't put them in a dice bag and carry it in your backpack, because that is the equivalent of shaking them in your hand for nonstop,
constantly rubbing against each other.
Yeah.
I mean, so
yeah, keep them
no
in the tin.
chainmail, but dice bags out of.
Yeah, we did sell those once and
Yeah.
only once.
Oh boy.
But yeah, just put it back in the tin and problem solved. The tin will have a little liner also on that kind of separates the dice from the tin itself, top and bottom. They will stay great if you just keep them in the tin.
So what about like care and feeding? Like they get dirty or whatever. I mean, is there a no like don't put ammonium nitrate on it or something? Like or can you just literally spray anything like Windex them and wipe them off and you're good to go?
Yeah, you should be fine with pretty much anything.
All right.
I wouldn't say leave them in, like soaking in certain chemicals. Like most of these should be fine, even if you just dropped them in isopropyl alcohol and left them for a few days. None of these are painted, so that's not an issue. But water will work fine, like water and a toothbrush. If you want to get into any of those little crevices, isopropyl alcohol is also great. Generally, yeah, you shouldn't really soapy water, perfectly fine. You won't have any problems.
Cool. Let's see. We got another one here. Can you explain a bit more about the pincer marks that may sometimes appear on the dice? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but we've got cadmium, palladium, lerasium, duralumin, and chromium are kind of shiny, and so I think one of the concerns is about those. And I'm going to actually pull the chromium out while you're talking and see if it's even possible for me to find the pincer marks. Because I tried once and I don't think I was able to.
I don't know if this is.
I found one. No.
Can you see? I don't know if this is in focus even, but
it's not. Which one is that?
That's this is. Let's see, brilliant. It's lerasium.
Lerasium. Got it. Okay.
This is
and you were on the 3 side?
Yeah. This
okay.
Is one that may be most visible. Some of the satin finishes. But yeah, like I was talking about earlier, this is a part of the plating process, and it's those opposing pins that pincers that clamps, little prongs that are holding the die during the plating process.
So when you try to put it like in the hole in the 4 so that at least it's in a hole in the die anyway.
Exactly. And most of the time, dice with recessed faces or even numbers aren't pristine in the way that we're doing these ones. They're usually filled in with some sort of inlay, which hides the tiny mark that could be there on some dice. Not all of them are going to have this, but it is inevitable that some may have the tiniest little kind of speck, and it sometimes the speck may have a copper look, which should make sense based on our previous conversation. because it's showing through to the copper layer. But yeah, so we do everything. So the manufacturing is, we don't do this in-house. We have partners that have actual factories that can do all of this stuff and have the equipment for it. But there are things that we do at that level, or that they will do for us, to try to ensure this doesn't happen. During the plating process, they're agitated a number of times to try to reposition the placement of the pins, the prongs. And that usually does it. But there are some cases where you'll see a tiny little speck inside one of the faces or inside one of the numbers. And usually you won't see it or notice it unless you're really looking for it. And that's part of the QC process as well. If it's like just this big copper dot in the middle of the face, then it's going to fail. So we try to weed out any that that make us uncomfortable seeing. But most of the time you won't see it unless you're really, really looking for it or know what you're looking for.
So I want to go back to the molds for a second, because it was a big part of the conversation we had. Obviously, we were trying to decide whether we could afford to make these dice ahead of time. And we knew that the only way to show people what these were, I mean, 3D renders are interesting and all, but quite frankly, nothing says these dice are cool than actually having them. So do you have, is it like one giant mold and you just basically cast all 20 of these dice at the same time, or is it one mold per die, or how does that work?
It is usually one mold per die. It may be, there may be up to 4 dice of the same kind in one mold.
Right.
It kind of depends on how complicated the design is. That's going to determine how many pieces are going to be needed for that mold, and that determines how many actual dice we can fit in one mold. So,
yeah, I know when we were doing the minis for Cthulhu Wars, which are not really minis because they're huge, but well, some of them are small, but and it was PVC, not metal, but those are ginormous molds, and you have to start thinking about, for instance, if you got your Cthulhu model and he's got wings and he's got parts, and you have to be able to think about how many of these can I fit in a mold, because otherwise, if you had said, for instance, well, there's actually 5 molds, and one mold is tin, pewter, iron, steel, and the other mold is copper, bronze, zinc, brass, it wouldn't shock me, because well, for obvious reasons, right? Because it's something to, I remember there was a mistake made on one of the mini projects we worked on, and they had a piece of one model in one mold and another piece of the model in another mold. So in order to get that model, they had to actually cast all 19.
2 different.
Yeah. And it's just it explodes the cost factors when you're talking about making projects. So if you had told me that this every one of these dice was in a singular mold, it would actually not have shocked me at all. But then it would be like, yeah, so when Hero Wannabe's dice are being molded, he's getting them all kicked out. But if you had also said that there's 10 molds and there's 2 die per mold, it also wouldn't shock me, because I don't actually know how big the molds are. I know some of the ones that we have done with plastic, they're like thousands of pounds. Some of them, they're incredibly heavy. How big are the molds that you guys usually work with for a project like this? Are they desk sized molds, or are they generally smaller?
Surprisingly, for zinc, they're a lot smaller than acrylic,
nice.
or other plastics. So maybe altogether you're looking at a mold that is maybe like this.
Okay.
Whereas like you're doing an acrylic set of polymer dice, that thing is like this big, and you're moving it with a crane.
Right. And that's what I'm used to, because I have no experience with metal molding, obviously. Metal injection metal molding at all.
Yeah, because the metal stuff like this is so usually acrylic is like a 2-part mold.
Right.
So it's just like the top and the bottom, and they're just these massive things, and they have to be like liquid cooled and all this stuff. For metal, there's usually sliding parts because you have to get different angles of a die perfect, and you can't live with like draft angles that would like make some of the faces look super skewed. So there's a lot of sliding pieces to that mold. It's multiple parts, so they're generally smaller and have far less on them. That's the other thing. Because of the sliding nature of the molds, you're not doing 40 pieces on one mold.
Cool. Well, the last thing I have, unless you have something else you want to talk about, I wanted to let everybody know that Pat from Crafty Games and I will be at PAX Unplugged next weekend, and that you will actually also be at PAX Unplugged. And so if you're in the Philly area and you plan on attending, Todd will be there, and more than happy to talk to you about the creation of the dice or any of his other products. And of course, we are willing, all three of us, Pat, I, and Todd, we're more than willing to talk to you about the Mistborn metal dice. My question for you is, do you think I'm going to have the dice tower by then? Because it would be cool to actually put it in here and bring it to Philly.
I think you will.
Awesome.
That'd
be great.
So whether we can get it to you, shipped over to you in time, or whether I just bring it to you to unplug.
That would be awesome.
I'm based on like the estimates I'm seeing, we should have it in a
nice
early next week.
I think that'll be great. We want people to be able to come and see the awesome dice you've made, and honestly, the awesome accessories that go with them. I have, by the way, I haven't run this by Pat, so hopefully it doesn't kill me. Somebody asked about some of the other tin products that, not tin as in like tin dice, but like the different holding products that you have. It's not really about the Mistborn project, but it's about accessories for holding their dice collections. And I know you guys have stuff on your website, so I just wanted to let people know that if you are you boothing it, is what I'm asking you at PAX Unplugged. Are you going to have a bunch of stuff for people to thumb through, or are you just kind of walking the show and not having a booth?
Oh, we have a booth. Yeah.
Awesome.
So you can come take a look at any of our stuff. I can bring the Mistborn dice. You'll have your set. I think we'll both have the same products.
I actually won't, because what we're doing every day is
we're
giving them away. So, for instance, today we'll be announcing, once this recording is saved, the winner of the bronze die, and the zinc one is up on Facebook and Twitter already, and we'll be giving those links out in the update. So by the time Philly comes, we're only going to have like 8, maybe 5 dice left. I mean, I think we're going to be down to the god medals at that point. So, and I don't have it. I literally don't have any more, because our attitude is give them to the backers, let them have them. And so I think you may have the only complete set left.
We'll see what we can do.
Brandon certainly has. We sent him a couple sets, so which is good. They're his symbols, so it's good that he has them. But no, we don't. We're not gonna have a full set. So I look forward to seeing you in
just a couple days,
10 days, yeah. And in the flesh, and maybe we can roll some bones together.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thank you.